Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to offer a much easier way to persist when it comes to robotic affirming, where you don't have to do what I call persist through the tears. In fact, I want to explain what persisting through the tears really is and why you get your manifestations even though you are having an emotional reaction to the 3D. I want to offer you a different tool and way of handling the 3D circumstance so that you don't have to go through this like emotional suffering or angst as you persist in your affirmations while having that emotional response or that unfavorable emotional reaction. And it all comes down to doing what I call mastering the pivot. The art of robotic affirming is saying a single affirmation over and over again in the state of being of neutrality. I mentioned this in my How I Personally Master Robotic Affirmations, where I talk about how I learned to persist in a very neutral and nonchalant tone of voice. So what it sounded like was, of course I'm wealthy. Obviously I'm wealthy. Duh, I'm wealthy. I am the wealthiest person I know. I'm extremely abundant, and basically just affirming from this nonchalant state of neutrality. The reason why this is because first, it more easily impresses your subconscious mind when you are affirming in neutrality rather than panic affirming. Second, neutrality is the state of being of having. It's also the state of being of your God state as well, because your God state is just your level of awareness. And all awareness is observation, indifference, neutrality, etc. But if you're tired of persisting through the tears when it comes to robotic affirming, note that you don't need to persist through the tears. You can take back control of your awareness by doing what I call mastering the pivot, where essentially what you do is instead of affirming through the tears in the face of this triggering 3D response, instead what you do is have the triggering response trigger you to instead back up and realize that you are in a triggered state of being, regain your awareness, aka your level of indifference, and then persist from that indifferent state of being in your desired new story, and result, robotic affirmation, what have you. That's the idea of learning how to master the pivot. So instead of attacking the situation with your affirmations, instead the idea of mastering the pivot is learning how to back up into your seat of awareness where you're no longer experiencing the triggering event, rather you are in observation mode of the triggering event. Remind yourself, I am God of my reality, and then persist forward in the direction of your favorable outcome or in your desired new story or desired manifestation, the thing that you want to experience. Whether you realize it or not, that's essentially what you're doing when you are persisting through the tears, except you're doing it in a very suffering type of way. Because what you think you're doing as you're affirming through the tears is you think that you are maintaining control of your ability to manifest while you're having your emotional reaction, but all you're really doing is riding out the emotional experience and keeping yourself quasi comforted in the fact that you can still affirm despite having the emotional reaction, which again is not bad or ineffective. You can get your manifestation that way if you want. But all that's going to happen as you are doing this is you're going to write out this emotional experience while affirming until the emotional experience inevitably stops and you stop crying and you naturally back up and regain your awareness and you're like, oh, and you feel that level of relief that comes with awareness or no longer being in that state of emotionally reacting or being triggered to your 3D circumstance. And then after that emotional response, you can go back to affirming from that neutral, indifferent state of being with your robotic affirmations until it manifests on the screen of space. That's essentially what happens when you are persisting through the tears. The reason why I don't like persisting through the tears though is because as you're persisting with your robotic affirmations, you're simultaneously experiencing a state of being of not having. And so all that's really happening as you are persisting through the tears is you are basically experiencing a very unfavorable experience of the two bumping up against each other until the emotional experience dissolves. And this friction between the two experiences is what causes the angst and the uncomfortableness, and if anything can make the emotional experience or state of being stronger because you're resisting it, you're pressing up against it, causing it to build in intensity. The good news is that if you're experiencing crying, you'll get to the point where you cannot cry anymore and it will be released from your body and the emotional experience will physically be gone from your body, and so that you can again maintain your affirmations or your new thoughts without that emotional experience. But instead of having to go through this time period where you're fighting you with you, instead I challenge you to practice a different way of persisting, where instead of having that that same 3D circumstance come up and trigger you into chronically affirming from the state of being triggered. Rather, have this 3D experience trigger you to backing up from the experience and the emotional reaction you're having back into the seat of indifference, and specifically the seat of awareness, which vibrationally feels like the seat of indifference. The art of separating yourself from a triggering event or emotional response to a triggering event is learning how to snap yourself out of the state of being triggered, where you're no longer experiencing the state of being, rather you're observing the state of being or the triggering circumstance. And the secret sauce on learning how to back up and separate yourself from the triggering event or the emotional response is actually extremely simple, but extremely underrated. And I see people talk about this a little bit, but they don't actually emphasize this key step on regaining your awareness from the triggering event. It's so simple and so easy to do. You can regain your indifferent awareness by simply reminding yourself what you're doing in the first place, which is changing a belief or changing your thoughts, or more specifically, changing the new story that you're telling yourself through the robotic affirming. So what does this look like? Let's say you have an experience where you changed an old story of, I'm really bad with money, I'm not good with money, I'm poor, I've always struggled with money, and it's very normal for me to not have money. And so you took that old story and you changed it to a new story. Money's really easy for me to manifest. I'm really good at manifesting money. In fact, abundance is my new normal, and I always have more than enough. So you have a new story that you're telling yourself. But let's say you have a triggering experience come up in your physical reality where you don't get paid as much this month. Let's say you work on an hourly basis. Or let's say that your bonus for this quarter is like 50% less than last quarter, basically implying that you have received less money than what you have in the past. And so what this experience causes within you initially is an experience of panic, because it's seemingly in contrast with the new story that you have been telling yourself via robotic affirmations. Instead of taking this experience and the immediate emotional reaction that you had with it and press against the emotional reaction with your new thoughts. No, I'm really good with money. I always have enough money. Money's really easy for me to manifest. I have loads of money, which honestly just perpetuates the state of being that you're currently in because you're doing it from that state of being. Instead of doing that, instead of reacting that way, train yourself to be triggered, to take a step back and realize first, you're having an emotional reaction to a circumstance. And then focus on regaining your neutral, indifferent self-awareness by reminding yourself what you're doing in the realm of manifesting. You are persisting in your new story. All you received was an echo of an old story. The 3D circumstance does not matter. What you're doing right now is you are changing a belief, and more specifically, a story about money. By reminding yourself of what you're doing in the first place when it comes to this art of persisting, naturally puts more and more space between you and the event that caused the emotional reaction within you. Because you're reminding yourself, wait, I'm actually the one in control. I'm the one telling a new story. I'm the one defining this experience. Sometimes when we have a triggering experience in our physical reality and we use it to immediately go to the new story, what that can cause is persistence in the new story, but from the old state of being. And that clash between the old state of being and the new story can feel like HE double hockey sticks, as we're persisting in the new story with our thoughts, while simultaneously from the state of being of the old story. It's the state of being that manifests your physical reality, not necessarily the exact string of words that you say. Persisting in the new story that you're telling yourself via words from the state being of being triggered or not having your manifestation is what causes the suffering or the angst of the persisting when you are persisting through the tears. And you don't have to experience persisting that way in order to get what you want. Instead of having the same circumstance trigger you to go immediately to persisting in the new story, have this triggering circumstance trigger you to remind yourself of what you're doing in the first place. Re-reminding is a tactic on how to actually regain your level of awareness, and more specifically your level of indifference and observation, so that you can seat yourself back into your position of power, which is observation mode, indifference mode, and neutrality, and then pivot to the new story that holds the new state of being, rather than fighting the old state of being with your new thoughts. What this looks like drawn out is something like this. Going from being triggered by your 3D experience that holds your old story, for example, about money, having this particular experience of the old story being triggered, trigger you specifically to Remind yourself of what you're doing. Wait, I am changing a belief. Wait, I'm changing a dominantly held story within my system. Regaining your indifferent level of awareness, your power seat, and then persisting in the new story or the new belief or the new identity, your new normal, rather than using the triggering experience that triggers the old state of being within you to immediately go to telling the new story. Put in the middle step of reminding yourself of what you're doing in the first place so that you can separate yourself from the emotional reaction or experience you're having, regain your awareness, your level of indifference, your observation mode, and then persist in the new story. It will make your life and this art of persisting so much more enjoyable, so much easier, and you'll actually feel a lot more self-empowered and more in control of not only your physical reaction to 3D circumstances, but also to just the 3D in general and what you decide to place your deliberate focus on, because you'll have more awareness of your state of being, not just the thoughts that make up your state of being, if that makes sense. So that's the big secret of mastering the pivot. Learning how to snap yourself out of the emotional experience that you're having in relationship to the triggering experience by reminding yourself of what you're doing in the first place. Wait, I'm changing a very dominantly held belief. I'm saturating my subconscious mind with a new story. That simple pre-step before you persist in the new story of reminding yourself is the tool that helps you regain your own awareness of who you are and what you're doing in the first place. In a way, it serves as a way to snap yourself out of your triggered state of being and put you back into your seat of power, your indifference, your awareness, your observation mode, and it's from there that you can go and persist from the state of being of having, which is the state of being of indifference, the state of being of this is obvious, the state of being of I'm the one in control, I'm the one making the rules, I'm the one in control of my reality because I'm in control of me. Manifestation is not only about your level of self-awareness, it's also about your level of self-mastery, and one of the ways that you can start practicing self-mastery is by regaining your level of self-awareness through simple techniques like reminding yourself of what you're doing in this manifesting process in the first place, rather than not being aware of your state of being and how you're persisting in the old state of being despite changing your thoughts. Learning this art of mastering the pivot is game-changing. You'll save yourself a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of suffering if you learn how to use triggering situations to separate yourself from the situation, from the circumstance, and your emotional response to it. Regain your seat of power by going from experiencing mode to observation mode, which feels like neutrality or indifference, and then pivoting to your desired reality from that state of neutrality or indifference. So try this out. If you're someone who persists through the tears and you don't like that experience of having to persist through the tears, you don't have to. Instead, practice this art of mastering the pivot. And let me know what you think about this video in the comments below. As always, I love hearing everyone's different perspectives, but we're gonna end the video here. Until next time, keep creating, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.